Hello everyone, welcome to another session on machine learning and data science. In this session, we will be looking at Python functions. So let's jump right into the topic and have some fun with Python functions. So in this session, we will be learning simple functions, the methods of passing arguments to a function, like single arguments, multiple arguments, arbitrary arguments. We'll also be looking at some critical things like arbitrary keyword arguments, and also we'll see how we can pass a simple list as an argument to the function. Also, you can define default parameters to a function, and also we will be looking at a very interesting concept of recursion and how it could be used inside a function to perform certain business scenarios. And also we'll be looking at a very trivial concept of pass statement, which we have been using for the past few videos, where we have been using pass statement in the if and while. So we'll see how a pass statement can be used inside a function as well. Okay, so let's get started with simple functions. Okay, so we have opened our SPIDER IDE through Anaconda, and now we can start with writing a user defined function. So for that, the first keyword that you would use is diff, and suppose I'll call my function as test function. Okay, and here I can give any kind of set of commands required for that particular function. And again, like in my previous videos where I have explained that the indentation in Python works more or less like parenthesis in other programming languages. So here you have to put the indentation as mandate for that particular thing to identify that this particular piece of code falls under the particular function. So I'll say print test. Now to call the function, I always have to call the function as test. That's it. The call is very simple. The call, I just have to type it as test, bracket open and bracket close. So that is the thing that we do. Now remember one thing, that before you call a particular function, that function definition should already exist in the code before, and you cannot ever call a function without defining it. So for that particular purpose, let me just show you first with the positive run scenario, and I'll show you the example as to what happens when you call the function before defining it as well. So let's run the positive scenario, the happy flow. So here I'm executing this, and as soon as I execute this, it has printed test for my piece of code here. Now again, if at all, if I take this test and put it before the definition of the function, so let me see what happens when you put this particular thing. So it should tentatively say that this particular function does not exist yet in the script file, so that's the reason it cannot execute. I'm just clicking the execute button right now. So as soon as I execute, you can see here that that particular function is not yet defined, therefore you cannot call the function before defining the function. So always the correct syntax would be test, like this. Okay, so this is a simple user defined function without any parameters or anything. So let's go on to the next topic of a parameterized user defined function. So where we pass arguments to the user defined function, and based on that arguments we perform the code logic. Now to pass the arguments into the user defined function, the user defined function needs to have that argument already defined. So here I will say argument say test1 as an input argument, and I will print out the test1, right? Okay, now here what I can do is I can define another variable, say t. Okay, so that value, I'll give it a value, say arg test, right? So if I pass this variable t onto the test argument and execute it, it will print me the value that is present for the user defined function. So let's see how it functions. So let me just go ahead and execute this. So you see here t is set as arg test, and when I printed t, it printed that arg test using the test function. Now here you can also pass this one directly. You don't need to define a variable as well. You can actually pass the variable as it is, and it would still function. So if you see here, the arg test is already defined. So this is a simple argument that you could pass to a user defined function. So again, follow a simple rule that you need to maintain the case of variables to ensure that Python doesn't throw any kind of exceptions always. And also please ensure that whenever you're defining a variable, you have the value assignment and all that are appropriately defined. So here again, the Python follows its general principle where it doesn't define the data type until unless you assign a value to it. So here if I put t is equal to 10, it would still function as a simple print statement, and it would consider the test1 input argument to be a numerical by nature, and it will print the value of 10. So this is a simple argument in Python. So let's jump on to the next topic related to the multiple arguments as well as list. So in case of multiple arguments, I can have something like this. I can have test1 and test2. So I can, when I call this function, I can call t. I can say t1 t2 is equal to 20. So here I'll write a simple logic here inside the user defined function. If t1 greater than t2, okay, print test1, right? Here it's like I need to define the test1 and test2 variables here, okay, and else print test2. Okay, so let's see how this functions. So I'll pass these variables t comma t2 to the input parameters of the user defined function, and let's execute that. So on executing, you can see that the value 20 is greater than t2 is greater than t. So the test2 value that is provided is actually greater than t, and it will print the value of this thing. So for clarity, let me just add another print statement inside the if. Okay, test1 parameter is printed. Okay, just for your clarity as to what part of the if loop is performed. So I'll say test2 parameter is printed. So if I just execute this one, you can see test2 parameter is printed. Now again, I can I can interchange these values. I can say 30. So when I call t1 and t2 and execute this, here t1 test1 parameter is printed. So this is a simple multiple argument related call that you make inside a Python user defined function. So this is how you can pass multiple parameters. It's not just 2, you can pass many, like 10 or 20 parameters as well. So that depends upon how you write your user defined function and what kind of functionality you are trying to achieve with it. Okay, so let's jump on to the next topic. So far you have seen a fixed set of parameters being passed to a function, and how those fixed set of parameters are performed in the logic and consumed by the function. There can be circumstances where you will not need a fixed number of arguments, but you might require an arbitrary number of arguments. So you can use arbitrary arguments in Python. So arbitrary arguments are usually represented with the starting value of star, and you put in the argument name that you want. So usually I would usually give the argument that name that is convenient and functionally relevant to the current implementation. So suppose I want to take the person's demographic data, and I want my function to actually print that person's demographic data. Then how I would do it is print first name is I will give. So I have defined the argument as person. So I'll take person, and I'm expecting its value to be sent in the position 0. Similarly, I could go for the last name as well. Okay. So I take the last name, I put it in position 1 of the input argument that I receive, and I can put the email and I put it in the second position. Now how would the call for this particular function look like? Let me show it to you. So I'm calling the test again. I'll call it, I'm giving my first name here, last name here, and also I'm giving my email address. Okay, so when I give this email address, and what the function would do is that it would consider that the argument would be a tuple that would come in. So there will be arbitrary number of items that would be present in the input parameters, and then it will sequentially assign the values in %0, %1, %2. You know that Python already starts the count value from 0. So the count value 0 here is Pawan, and for the count value 1 you have Garmela, and then you have the email address specified here. So let me just go ahead and execute this one. So when you execute this, you can see the first name, last name, and email is provided. Now here you have to take proper precaution. In case you somehow mess up the sequence in which the parameters are passed, then the corresponding functionality also will get impacted. So if you see here, if I execute this, it's giving me the email address as Garmela. So you need to take proper precaution in the sequence in which you are providing. Suppose you want to give the user the capability to actually not depend upon the sequence of the input parameters, but on specific keywords, then you can do keyword based arbitrary arguments. So for that you will start using 2 stars in front of the name. Okay, so 1 star for arbitrary arguments and 2 stars for something that is keyword based arbitrary argument. And here you can give the value fname, lname, and email. So I'll say my fname, right? So since we are using Python, we'll use all small letters here. Okay, they're case sensitive. I apologize for that. Sometimes I tend to get carried away and write things in camel case, but you know, that's a habit hard to break because of my coding abilities in other languages as well. So I'll have lname, and I'll have the email as well. Okay, so if I execute this again, what it does is that it will take first name keyword, and for the first name keyword it will check what the value is provided. So it will take that value and it will print it out. So let me just show it to you here. So you can see here first name, last name, and email are printed accurately. Now what happens if I change the sequence? Now that you know we are using keyword based arguments, sequence doesn't matter anymore. So no matter what sequence I give, it would still function properly. But earlier it was not the case because I was not using keywords. The sequence was impacting the output that I was receiving. So let me just execute that. Now you can see that despite the change in sequence, since we have used keywords, that would not impact our output result set, and the appropriate value would be mapped to the appropriate keyword. So apart from that, in your functions you can actually use a default constraint. So let me just take a small example here. Let me give a variable test1 and assign it a default value, say let me say default value printed. Okay, and I would print test1. Okay, now if I call this user defined function, right, if I call this user defined function and I pass the input argument, then that input argument which I have passed is the one that will be taken into consideration and printed out. Otherwise it will print the default value. So let me show you how it works. So if I say test Pawan, okay, so I'm passing the value Pawan, and if I execute this, okay, so what will happen? I'm sorry, there should not be any indentation here. I apologize for that. But if I execute this, what will happen? Pawan will be printed. Now if at all, if I don't pass any variable value and if I execute this, okay, so what will happen? The default value is printed. Now sometimes I can have my functions to not use or not perform any activity at all. So for that particular purpose, I can use something called as a pass, right? So this pass we have seen while using if statement, we have seen it while using while, and we have also seen it used in for statements. And similarly, in the function you can have pass. The primary thing is that a function should never be left empty. You should not create an empty function, but in case if you need to, pass is the statement that you would use. So if I execute this, it will do nothing, no operation, and it will simply print out the blank value. So here in this particular segment, we have seen what are arbitrary arguments. We have seen arbitrary arguments with keyword. We have seen the default constraint being assigned to it, and also we have seen how a trivial thing such as pass can be used inside our functions to perform necessary operations. So moving on to the last topic of this video, we'll start looking at the recursion part of the user-defined functions. So let me just write a small logic where it will print out the value that comes across in each recursion, right? So I'll say if let me just take an input parameter k, right? If k is not equal to 0, right? If k is greater than 0, okay, print k equals to k minus 1. Else, just let's kill the, okay, so I'm going to say print recursion is complete. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm checking the value of k, whether the value of k is greater than 0 or not, and if the value of k is greater than 0, then I'm saying that you apply the print the value of k and all, and then you perform the k is equal to k minus 1 inside the loop itself, and then if at all, if that is done, then what you can do is you can print that the recursion is complete. So let's go ahead and execute this and see how it works. I'll say test 6. Okay, so here the thing is that it's saying that the indent doesn't match. So let's see what's happening with the indent. Right, there we go. So always take proper precaution that the indent always matches accurately, otherwise you will start facing errors in your execution. So let's go ahead and execute this one and see what happens. So you're doing the point of test, right? So here I'm doing the test, it's printing only once. So now if I put a recursion here, okay, I will say print k, and I will call the same function test of k. Okay, now let me put this after I perform the subtraction operation. So what happens is, first it will take the value of k, then after taking the value of k, it would come here, it would print k, it would do a -1 operation, and then it would go into the loop again, where again it comes here. This time the value of k will be 5, okay, and upon the value of 5, it would take the k is equal to k minus 1, 4, and it would call it again. So let me show you this, how it functions when it is executed. So if I go here, see, it is performing 6 5 4 3 2 1, and once the recursion lower endpoint is hit, it is just completing the recursion exiting the loop. So this is how a simple recursion is implemented. Earlier I showed you when you do a print and k minus 1, it is just printing the value of k, it is performing one operation of reduction of value of k, but it's not printing anything. So now I put the test function again being called inside this main function. So it is nothing but a simple example of recursion. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you could get more updates regarding my videos such as these. Thank you.